Hi everybody, Michael Campbell here. I'm at the 2017 Canadian Science Policy Conference, and sitting with me today is Dr. Amy Luers, Executive Director of Future Earth. Hi Amy, nice to meet you.
Hi, good to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about what Future Earth is?
Sure. So Future Earth is an international organization with a mission to accelerate transformations to global sustainability through research and innovation. And that is an effort that was launched 2 years ago, and it builds on 30 years of global collaboration on research on global environmental change. And the reason Future Earth was launched was because after 30 years of research, we came to the point where we began to understand that we have to work on sustainability issues, whether they're local or global, with the perspective that the Earth system and the linked Earth-human systems, we have to think of together. We can no longer think of local sustainability issues in isolation of global issues. And so the international scientific or funding community that was funding research on global environmental sustainability came to the conclusion we have to advance this in a way, the research, so that it can be more, we can move towards a system that allows us to take the knowledge we're understanding at a global level and apply that at all levels of management so that we can really move towards sustainable development. And so what we do is we have offices around the world, and this distributed nature is really important to Future Earth's work, because to move from understanding this global systems approach to the challenge to actually operationalizing this in a management perspective, we need to go from looking at this from just a global perspective to a bottom-up perspective of understanding the system and managing the system. And so that's why we work at a distributed level. We work with regions across the world to understand how is the global environment changing and what are the opportunities for us to manage this in a distributed nature.
You're a recent addition to Future Earth. Now that you're part of the team, where do you see it going and what do you really hope for it?
So, yeah, I'm new. I've been there only for about 2 months, and so I'm still getting to know the full, the range of activities that we're engaged in around the world, and it's very exciting. I think a key piece for global sustainability at this stage is to connect this bottom-up and top-down approaches to not only understanding the challenges of the world, but also for implementing action. And so, you know, we work on really 4 different areas. On the one hand, we work on facilitating research for global sustainability issues, that integrated approach. 2, we work on seeding problem-based collaborations, so collaborations across disciplines, across sectors, with the private sector, with policy, to sit down together to co-design and develop the knowledge to produce solutions to global sustainability issues. And we also build community across different sectors on solutions-oriented issues. And this is a really critical thing, because I come into this from my experience working on science policy issues. I've worked in private sector, I've worked in government, I've worked in civil society and academia. And what I find is, you know, I have my sort of personal 3 Ps of science policy work, and that's people, problems, and process. And so moving forward with Future Earth, I think it's really critical for us to work on all 3 of these issues, to build those networks, build the networks of people who are working on global sustainability across different sectors. Focus, don't start with research questions, start with problems that people in society are trying to solve, and work together, come together to do it. And then understand the processes by which the knowledge is produced and which the knowledge is transferred into society. How is that information passed? And that could be through things like what is the academic community calls transdisciplinary research, co-designing research together. But it also could be things like artificial intelligence. That is a new way that knowledge is produced and knowledge is transferred in society. So we need to look at all aspects of these 3 Ps, as I call them.
Is there a particular problem that you're most excited to tackle now that you've joined Future Earth?
Well, I think that one of the challenges for global sustainability, which is so helpfully captured in the Sustainable Development Goals, is that a recognition that we need to think about all of these issues of sustainability in. We can't think of any of them in isolation. Now, I've spent a good deal of time of my career working on climate change and also on water security, which I think of as intimately linked. But I think the challenge that we will need to focus is, as climate change becomes much more center stage, recognize that that has to be part of this larger global sustainable development goals framework. So I would say moving forward and thinking about how to operationalize something like the Sustainable Development Goals from a bottom-up perspective to address the global challenges will be a real focus of our work going forward.
So Future Earth has a 10-year initiative. Can you explain why it's got a time limit on it, and what does that entail?
Well, Future Earth was initiated as an evolution of a collaboration between funding agencies to say we want to fund global environmental change research and collaboration in a new way. And I think that the vision was, we're going to invest in 10 years to see what change we have. I don't necessarily see that Future Earth ends in 10 years, but I think sort of this phase of this transitional phase of we want to create a new world where we can operationalize management of global sustainability issues at all scales, that where we can have the co-production and co-development of research and innovation agendas to address these issues, and that where we can develop the institutional structures that sort of collaboration can work moving forward. What the Future Earth movement, if you will, looks like in 10 years, it will probably look very different. If we're successful, it looks very different than it does today. But I wouldn't say that the mission ends after 10 years.
Okay. Now, as you mentioned, you've been working with climate change and water sustainability for over 20 years. In the past few years, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for Canada, and what do you see as the biggest shortcomings that as a country we have undertaken?
Well, I'm new to Canada per se. Okay. I just moved to Canada a couple months ago. But I think in the world, there are a couple of things that I would highlight in that context. You know, in the world, what is really exciting right now is that there has been this transition from, 30 years ago when global sustainability sort of emerged as an issue with the Brundtland Accord and the UN process. It was, we looked at resource sustainability, and it was very top-down approach of managing this, driven by the UN. Now we have structures in place where, first of all, we're looking at whole systems instead of just resources, and we have set up structures like the Climate Paris Accord and the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals as sort of scaffolding or structure, if you will, for bottom-up approaches to addressing global challenges. And in this context, having come from the US and now being in Canada, I see a real opportunity for Canada to be a leader in, one, demonstrating bringing the role of science and technology to addressing these global issues, because I think it does have to be that intersection. And I think in particular because our southern partner is not as leading on these issues as they could. I think in North America we really do need a leader on these issues, and I think Canada can become that in the broader void. And another area which I think in particular, which is very exciting for me, where I think there's a lot of opportunity, is in the context of the tech sector and science community. What's transforming our world more rapidly than anything in recent history is the fourth industrial revolution, or the digital revolution. And we have to think about how the speed of that change can actually have things like global sustainability at the center of that movement.
Really interesting. So you actually worked at Google for a few years as the Senior Environment Program Manager. How do you see the role of the private sector? What is their responsibility in terms of climate change and water sustainability, and what do they need to do more?
Well, the role of the private sector is critical, and if we don't involve the private sector in an effective way for identifying and pushing forward solutions, we really won't succeed. Now, the good news is that the private sector is getting much more engaged on these issues, and the international governance process is broadening the tent, if you will, to include the private sector more directly in terms of the solution pathway, whether it's the UN process or national government processes. I was in the Obama administration, and we were very active continuously in engaging the private sector for both developing solutions and seeding opportunities that could move forward. So specifically, what I think how that plays out, I think there are a couple of ways that plays out. For example, on the one hand, I mentioned this idea of wanting to bring the tech sector together with researchers to think about how to put climate issues and sustainability at the center of this transformation that society is going through. So why would the private sector be involved in this? Well, there are a number of reasons they could be involved in it. First of all, I think that there really are companies that are leading at really looking for a sustainable, to make a difference in the sustainable world. So I think there is a genuine interest in heading in that direction. But I think also there's a new economy that's developing. And that new economy, there's a competition of who is going to be the leader. Who's going to be the leader of environmental information? Who is going to be the leader in terms of the companies that develop the world, the sustainable world in the future? And so if we can engage at the center of the research community, the policy community, and those companies that are competing to build that sustainable world, and design the research and innovation agenda that will get us there, then I think we can see the sorts of competition in the private sector world that can get us on a path for exponential change in that direction, which is what we need.
Great. Now, there may be some young people who are going to watch this video. What sort of research or fields do you think there's an opportunity for them to really focus on that there isn't as many people looking at these problems right now?
Well, I'm not sure I will highlight, I can highlight right off the bat what people aren't looking at, but let me say where I think there are real opportunities for really hands-on work. First of all, if they're researchers or they're young people, I think focusing on thinking about what are the problems that folks are addressing, and really working towards thinking about those outside of their traditional community. Really push yourselves to if you have an idea, then think about it in various different sectors. I often push myself to go to different settings, listen about issues in how they're talked about with very different communities, whether it's the foreign policy community, the private sector, government, academia. And if you think about one issue, whether it's water or food security, even though they're not named that things, these are talked about so differently. And it's only when you get those people together that you can define the problem in an effective way to really think about transformational projects to work on. But I think the couple of areas that are really important, I think, is thinking about it in the context of cities. Because there's this transition of bottom-up approaches to addressing global sustainability issues, how to have cities be agents of change at a global scale is still not clear. They're a great political movement. It's a huge force in terms of so many issues, but there's still work to be done to say, well, if the cities are going to be real leaders to drive global sustainability issues, what does that look like?
Are there any cities that maybe we can highlight that are doing a really good job and other cities should look towards as examples?
Well, I think that there are a lot of cities in Canada that are certainly taking a lead on sustainability issues. But I think the area, when you say what's not being done, I think the area that needs work isn't necessarily that one city does something, but how do you scale, replicate the efforts of one city so that collectively cities can be agents of change at a global scale? So the statistic that recently came out, and I hope I get this right, but it's something like 60% of the urban development that will have happened by the year 2030, so 15 years from now, has not yet been built. That is a phenomenal statistic. And when I think about can cities be the driver of global sustainability, who's thinking about the direction of those cities? We don't have someone who really governs the whole world, the whole Earth systems. We have the head of the UN, but they don't govern the whole system. And so if we are really moving to addressing these global sustainabilities from the bottom up, how do we create those networks and information systems so that we can enable the direction of change so that the cities of the future are established to meet the Sustainable Development Goals and be low carbon or zero carbon cities?
Thank you. I learned a lot. For the folks watching, can you tell them where they can find out more about you and Future Earth?
Yeah, so www.futureearth.org is our website, and you can find information about me there too. But we have lots of projects going on, and eager to engage, certainly as a new person to Canada, particularly engaged, eager to see how I can work with the exciting work that's happening in Canada on sustainability issues and science and policy more broadly.
Dr. Luers, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks.